Well, everyone, welcome, 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 welcome to the CLP webcast. It's about conversations about U.S. investment immigration. And we aim on this platform to talk about topics that we're all talking about and talk to people we want to hear from and learn from. And boy, I am hitting both those checkbox out of the ballpark today with Tom Rosenfeld. And the crowd goes wild.
You make me
Tom,
feel strong. Yeah. Go ahead.
Tom Rosenfeld is the founder, and I'm sure you have all sorts of other titles, chairman, blah, 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 chief jefe of CanAm Enterprises, which we all know is one of the most established and successful EB-5 regional centers of all time. And Tom is somebody I've known for many, many years. I don't want to say how long. I think my gray hairs speak for themselves on that one. And I am just really delighted and excited and ever so pleased to talk to Tom today. And we're going to be talking about, among other things, EB-5 legislation. I think you're going to want to hear from Tom on this. So, Tom, tell us about CanAm, but about you.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you so much for those kind words. We love you, and this is, I don't do a lot of these anymore, but I love doing this with you because, as you said, we've got so much history, and and this is special in a way because when we had issues, and we always would call on you, Carolyn, and you always came through. But what a journey we've all been on, and it's been wonderful. So thank you, and I'm really pleased to be here. Um, you want to know about me?
Yeah, I want to know about you.
Well, I'll just tell you. I mean, there is no accident that I got in this when you really think about it. I'm an immigrant. I was born in Israel. My parents came here when I was 5. They were scared to death. They didn't have a lot of money. We were sponsored by our aunt in Philadelphia, um, who, interestingly enough, and this is just like when we got off the plane, my name in Hebrew was Naphtali. When I got off the plane, or not even the plane, it was a boat. Obviously, it was a boat, and my aunt just gave me the name Tommy. It wasn't Thomas, it wasn't anything. And it literally, my passport, my immigration papers, it all says Tommy. And we just came, and because it's not a Hebrew name or anything like that, or a Jewish name, but so that my official name is really Tommy. But nobody wanted to do business with Tommy, so I went to Tom. But that's a little tidbit. I don't share that often, but
That's awesome.
we were here. We were very, very low middle class, but we had everything we wanted. We had great parents and great family. After high school, we went, I was at Price Waterhouse for a while in audit. Then I went to law school, and they brought me back for tax. And so that background, and then one of the clients took me out to do some real estate investment opportunities, and that was early. That was like 83, 84. So I'm aging myself, but really in about, when we were there after a few years, everybody was talking about global investment, and everybody was trying to get investors globally and coming into the US, and fax machines were going crazy. That really ages us.
Yes.
But we went up to Canada, and when we were there, we were working with our attorneys, and I heard about this Canadian Immigrant Investor Program in 1987, and the idea that you could go globally and make investments, but you could also get an immigration kicker just blew my mind. And so we learned everything we could about it. And frankly, we just started our own thing. I took one person out of the firm, and Michael and I really hit the right idea at the right time. You didn't have to be a genius to figure out that Hong Kong was going to China in '97, and there was a lot of really scared people in Hong Kong. And we got down there. We represented the provinces of Prince Edward Island and New Brunswick, and we just hit the right idea at the right time. And I think
Oh my gosh.
what a great experience. Yeah.
That is phenomenal. And so was there something, I mean, the way that you tell that story,
Right.
it makes so much sense. You're an immigrant, you're working in finance, you got into real
Right.
estate, this immigration program comes along and it combines all those things.
Absolutely.
And then you have to take the credit. You had the foresight to see that there was an overseas opportunity there,
Right.
based on what was happening. Was there like one element in all of that that just sparked it for you, that really just that?
I mean, I think the spark for me was, first of all, I always wanted to travel internationally. I don't know why. Um, and I really do. And I wasn't married, so we could take some risks. And I think that was important. And and I think just actually hearing this and thinking, wow, if not now, when? Plus, it just made so much sense. I mean, everybody was worried about China in '87. It's not the economic powerhouse it is today. Um, and Canada, they had a great program. I mean, the whole, the truth is the U.S. program, at least the pilot program, the regional center program, largely based on Canada, because Canada was one of the first. And as you all know, we went there, um, 87, and the only difference we had, I think, was we didn't get greedy. I mean, everybody was
Mhm.
there saying, we're going to make you rich and you're going to get a green card. We never took that approach. We were always kind of, you know what, if you get a green card and you get your money back, you're doing really great. And frankly, a lot of those other deals fell apart.
I was
We
just going to
started working
ask,
with,
what happened to those other guys?
yeah, those deals hurt. And the truth is, once we were actually work with a lot of the big banks, the Canadian banks. Don't ask me, I'm an American. I don't know how we did this, but we basically worked with the Canadian banks there because they had all these great wealthy private banking clients. But they liked us because ours was predictable. They weren't, they can go to their clients and say, hey, look, if you want to you're not going to get rich here, but we looked at this deal. They're working with the provinces. We think there's good collateral here. We think you'll get your money back. We think the program's real. So this is predictable. And they did it largely because they wanted clients, is these high net worth clients when they came to Canada. And so it was a win-win, and we've got all the banks working with us,
Oh my
and it
gosh.
worked out really well.
I love that. Um,
Yeah,
so don't want to get us too derailed, but I think it's
right,
relevant to what we're talking about. You praised the Canadian program.
right.
What was it about the Canadian program that you think is 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 good? What is it about it that's worth
Yeah,
talking about?
I mean, the Canadian program was, it basically said it was a provincial program. He said the provinces have to decide whether an investment is a significant economic benefit. Um, and then, so we pretty much could get those consents from the provinces pretty easily. But the key was, this was at the time it was $150,000 investment for have-not provinces like Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick. The have provinces were like Ontario and and British Columbia. They were 250. And frankly, when we were down there, at some point the U.S. program came in, and as you know, the U.S. program was based on a $500,000 investment. And you'll also know that part of the reason they went to these promissory notes and only put up 150,000 was to compete with the Canadian program.
I did not know that.
Yeah, no, and that's what happened. That was one of the main, everybody, it was the Canadian program was so 500, 150. The US program for me was always much, much tougher because at that time you had to really create 10 jobs. It was very hard to pool investors. I didn't know how they were going to do it. And I was scared to death of the US, regulatory system. But the Canadian program just seemed much more reasonable. But the US program took hold and everybody, but it got greedy, and part of the reason it almost fell apart was this whole promissory note business that they were all trying to do. But it was all based on competing with Canada at the time, which was really the model. I mean, I think the success of the Canadian program was huge down
So those are the good things about the Canadian program. Our program was harder, maybe less predictable. but our program is still around, although again, that's what we're going to talk about.
Right.
The Canadian program kind of collapsed.
Right.
So what do we learn from there? It had these good features. It was predictable. It had a reasonable amount. It was reasonable, but
you know what, the Canadian program collapsed for one reason, because and it wasn't like there wasn't a great deal of demand. There was a great deal of demand for the Canadian program. What happened was, if you go to British Columbia now, there were so many wealthy people from Hong Kong coming there and buying houses, tearing it down, these little houses, and building mansions. It became a political issue for Canada. And so they had to scale back because people were getting really upset about living in a town where people owned more than they did. And it just looked like that program was going to go on. And so at the end, frankly, Canada had a backlog of 40,000 people, something like that. And Canada is a pretty honorable country. They effectively gave back everybody their money, even if you were in the queue, which was really something that people were a little astonished about. And we will get, but that was in the big thing. There was a program. It was good.
That's so interesting, because it isn't like there was something, like there wasn't fraud or like something bad about the program. It's that it was immensely successful, and it did exactly what it was supposed to do.
It was just too successful.
But it was almost too successful.
Right. And it's a country of 30 million, 33 million people, and all of a sudden you're bringing in this wave of wealth, and they're buying up all the best properties, and then they're building mansions. And, it became, and their kids are running around in like these sports cars. And I mean, it really became a social economic issue and a political issue. And that really is the backdrop. I mean, people aren't, but that, if you talk to people on the in-house, on the that were there, they know that's why that happened. It wasn't the program was extremely successful.
Yeah. Wow. That is totally fascinating. Right. All right. So I'm going to swing us back around to our program, to the EB-5 program. Okay. So we've already touched on this in that incredible story so far, but you've been there. The program, the EB-5 program, was created by IMACT in 1990. The pilot program, or the regional center program, was created in 1992, enacted in 1993.
Right.
You've been there. So tell us, what is the story of the EB-5 program and let's just take it from when you started participating in. What's the arc of it? I mean, what is this?
I mean, I thought, first of all, as you know, the program was, you put in abeyance from 97 to 2002, when all the precedent decisions came in. And we watched that, and but what happened then was those precedent decisions kind of gave everybody a roadmap. And there was and I don't remember the exact details, but there was, before, you couldn't put together a group of investors. It was really hard under the existing rules or regs to put together a group of 10 or 15 or 20.
What was hard about it? Was it just like
it was like the law? You had to be. It was something about the partnership had to be formed.
Okay, so before the pilot program came online. Okay.
Yeah. So, but once you had some guidelines, and then once you could put together a limited partnership with a number of people, it was still hard, because we really believed at that time you had to create 10 direct jobs.
Yeah.
But what we did effectively, because I'm from Philadelphia, the USCIS was restarting the program. It looked like they were sincere about doing it, but I went to PIDC, which was the city of Philadelphia, which gave, I was nobody, so it gave me a lot of credibility. And the USCIS, Maury Beret, was down there, and he wanted to learn from the program. So the city wanted to have a meeting there. You could get a meeting, because it was like city of Philadelphia coming down, and we went and talked to him, and we basically said at the time, look, we want to do, the city of Philadelphia, they wanted to use this program for loans. I mean, kind of loan, and then there was an issue. We didn't want to start if you couldn't do that. And it wasn't totally clear, but Maury thought that it was okay. And we were very upfront. This is, we want to do loans. We're going to take some risks, but these are going to facilitate jobs that wouldn't otherwise occur. And at the end of the day, he was okay with that. But there was a dispute about that. And we had a big AAO, Administrative Appeals Office decision. And we were the case. Lynette, it was our third case, but they were holding everything up until they dealt with it. And I think they came down, and I think people I think it was a big deal. Once they
Oh yeah,
came
it's
down with the
huge.
loan model,
It's
it was
huge.
a it
Yeah,
changed the whole industry.
yeah,
And there were people who thought it had to be equity and for
yeah.
risk.
So let me just
That was
pause for
huge.
context because I don't think folks understand.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there was a question. We all know EB-5 investments have to be at risk, right?
Right.
And they still do very much so. So there was a question when you start building in structures, you've got the new commercial enterprise and you have other entities that the new commercial enterprise may be funding to develop and create jobs. There's a question as to whether that participation, that funding had to be equity. Did it have to be where the new commercial enterprise is purchasing interest in the job creating entity? That's the entity we call it. We call that that developing entity, job creating entity now. Or could the new commercial enterprise make a loan to the developing entity? This was a question. And Tom tested this question
Right.
there were and won an AAO decision. This was a landmark decision that said, okay, we can do loans in the regional center program.
And that was big, and that was huge because all of a sudden a lot of people became interested. And the other thing I think that was really important in this whole, a milestone that really built the EB-5 program was opening up China. And there, frankly, think about it, we were doing the Canadian, we were in Asia, we had contacts. So, people trusted us. We had a lot of credibility. So people were saying China, 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 and we were, but the rule said this had to be legally sourced money. And the question was, well, China had currency restrictions. Is it legally sourced money if it comes out of China and it subverts their currency restrictions? And we were like, I'm not taking that risk. But again, not because of me, but because of PIDC, we went down to see more and say, hey, we have an issue here. There's China, they earn their money legally, but there's an issue about the currency restrictions. And we don't want to do this unless, we don't want to create trouble. So Maury said, well, thank you very much. But he took it right up the administration. He didn't make the call here. And it took like 5-6 months. But then they came back and said, no, we're not in the business of enforcing China's currency restrictions, but we are in the business of making sure that these people's money is legally sourced. And so that was it. So all of a sudden, we went to China and we had contacts, and people were skeptical because you got to remember at that point, this is right after all the trouble with the US program. Just, it was a 5-year. So people were skeptical, but we had enough, people had enough confidence in us. And so we started slow, we put in an I-526. And at that time, it went to the Texas Service Center. The first thing we did was get an RFE about, is this legally sourced money? And I'm like, hey, Maury, and Maury called the Texas Service Center. We got approved because they took it up the chain earlier. And so that was one of the big milestones. That was
That's
a big
huge.
deal.
We have zero appreciation of that now.
Oh, it was huge.
That foundation's been laid.
And so then it was about the consular interview. And I mean, I won't even go, but there's so many stories there, but the consulate approved it, which was a big deal. And then it took, I mean, we pretty much, all the big players, they started with us. Now and we know them well, they respect us, they probably invested with us, frankly, to get their EB-5, but we weren't paying the big fees everybody else was. But we're still good friends. But the big thing was, once they got their the consular interview, got a visa, then it went to another level. And once the I-829 was approved, this thing went ballistic.
Oh my gosh, how many champagne bottles did you
Oh my God.
I just gotta know.
You wouldn't believe, like, you could, at that time, we would go into a seminar and there'd be like 100 people there. Before you left, 30 people would sign up for your thing. I mean, it was, and what the one is, I never appreciated. I understood, intellectually how big China was.
Yeah,
I had no idea how big this population was, because I was, I'm a little pitcher from Philly. I couldn't believe I was making this kind of money. And then all of a sudden, now we're like in the middle, like, I was very conservative, and I just wanted to make sure that we did it right. And probably we've done great. But we could, in retrospect, I mean, this thing could have grown. I mean, people were dying for product, and
Gosh.
it was just, and we would put out $100 million deal. It would sell in a month, like, and less than a month. I mean, it was crazy, but
Yeah.
it was huge back then. And then it became, and then 2008 happened, and that was a big deal. And I think the other big,
Tell me about 2008. I mean, that's another
oh,
watershed
huge.
moment in the history of EB-5. So tell us about 2008.
Well, I mean, 2000, we were even scared to death of 2008. I mean, we were in the middle of, we were doing a project with the Philadelphia Convention Center.
Mhm.
And we actually, they were redoing it, and we were going to raise 100 million. Again, back then it was 100 million was not, we could do it. And so at the time we did it, it was, I don't know. I mean, the city, the truth was, at that time, the Philadelphia Convention Center, because of 2008, a lot of projects that were started stopped. And the
Yeah,
Philadelphia
I remember
Convention Center
that.
didn't get money. We were in the middle of potentially doing a hotel that had to stop. It was a big deal, but
So
and I
2008 for people, for the millennials joining us, that was when the world imploded.
right,
The
right,
financial markets just went away, and
right.
literally buildings that were in the middle of being developed
It was
stopped.
scary. It was really scary times, and there was no source of capital. Even the bond market was so expensive that if you ask Governor Rendell, he'll say, "But for our money, that project would have stopped, and if it would have stopped, there was no coming back, and that Philadelphia Convention Center would not have been built." I mean, it really was a point where once you stop and take everybody away, bringing it all back in a timely manner. Um, but
Wow.
we
Yeah.
but the country really needed EB-5 at that time was a huge, huge benefit to the country and job creation, and particularly projects that were in the middle of there was trouble, and we had certain projects we raised money for, we wouldn't lend because they couldn't come up with the rest of their capital stack was, the banks, backed off on it. So it was a lot of trouble, but I think once people saw the benefit of this, that was another big moment. And then the final big moment for me was when there was always we always thought you had to create 10 direct jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And so and we did, and that's why we work with cities. We work with the city of Philadelphia, state. We were always into working with the agencies, one for the credibility, but two because they were in the business of job creation, and so were we. And we thought you had to create 10. But when the whole issue of economic modeling and using the expense model, and you can give the back. Once that came into fruition, and then you had every construction job in the world could qualify for those 10 direct or indirect jobs, the place went wild. And that's when New York went wild, and that's when everything went. But that was a critical moment too. And I'm aging myself, but I am kind of, this is kind of like memory lane, and brings back a lot of stuff.
Totally, totally. Oh my gosh. And what a ride. What a ride. So, all right. So you just kind of took us through the heyday of it all.
Right, right,
Okay. And so let's talk about the regulations briefly, because we're going
right.
to talk about, we're
Sure,
going to look ahead. So then it feels like things kind of came to a careening halt
right,
with the Chinese investor backlog.
right, right.
That's the first
That's the moment.
moment and
Yeah,
huge.
right,
And then the regulations changing the investment amount from 500,000 to 900,000. There just ain't that many people who can throw that down, even for a U.S. green card.
right.
So what have those moments meant for you? What are
I
they
think
about?
I actually think, there was two things. The regs, obviously, the TEA was, that was they changed the definition of TEA, but it's not the $900,000. I think there's a lot. There's actually, if you look at all the other international programs,
Yeah,
they're
way
more
more
or less,
expensive.
yeah, $900,000. People can come up with that. That's not what people would be complaining about. The complaint is really the backlog, and frankly, not just the backlog, but even for countries that there is no backlog, if you have to wait 2 or 3 years to get an application, then those people are kind of like, well, what am I doing? If you could make that 5 months, 6 months, you would still get a lot of people in not the backlog countries. Those two things are the big thing. And I think the TEA is part of the reason we're having all this dispute now with June 30th and stuff. But I don't really think it was the, I don't think it was the 900,000. I think the industry can live with 900,000 and do just fine.
Wow. Okay. So I think what you just did was give us the formula to reinvigorate this program. Aside from legislative things,
Right.
processing times, processing. I mean, we all have these conversations.
Right.
I have a 17-year-old. Is this
Right.
kid going to get the green card?
Right.
I mean, there's the predictability in time frames. Desperately need that. And what I'm hearing you say is if we can deliver that, that itself can bring the market back.
Totally. Totally. I mean, I think actually, if you actually could, right, processing times, other than the backlog countries, you would start seeing them pick up in a big way too, because then there's predictability and they don't have to worry about all these things. And, you know, let's face it, the US program has such a history of bumps and starts and inconsistencies. And, you know, so people, there's a lack of trust a little, but if you could bring the processing times down, I think the program would take a step up. If you can get the backlog out of the way, then it goes through the roof again.
Wow. Okay, folks, you heard it from Tom Rosenfeld. That's the formula. That's the formula. Okay. So now let's talk about where we are. So we are where we are. We've got the June 30 sunset coming up. Right. So what are the conversations you're having with your investors already in, prospective investors?
I mean, there's no question that people are, particularly the investors that have invested and they're in the queue and they're waiting for their I-526. I mean, you know, frankly, that there was that the word that this could end on June 30th in a way where everybody in the queue was just going to be completely, you're not getting a green card, you're not getting a permanent green card, you've invested your money, you can't get it back, but you're screwed for all your immigration benefits. That scared the hell out of people. I mean, it just did. And we've been through so many of these extensions where the same issues were on the table, really. But for whatever reason, because this one blew up in a way where investors were scared to death. And I think, frankly, even given the program was slow as it is in the past, probably the worst year I've seen it. But then when you couple that with the idea that, we don't know what, you know, we don't think there's going to be an extension, people got really nervous. And you know, justifiably, a lot of people wanted to sit on the sidelines for a while until they understood what was going on. So, you know, I think I think everybody acts in good faith, but there is a lot of concern about this June 30th and what it means, because let's face it, you know, people went out of their way to decouple this from the spending bill. And so that had meaning to people. This is a little different than before, because in the past, we were always part of a must-pass spending bill. To decouple it is a big issue. So everybody thought this was really important to address the concerns that the people who were responsible for decoupling it, the senators Leahy and Grassley, wanted addressed, which was, we want our integrity provisions, and we've been asking for them for years and years and years, and we really don't think it's fair that you haven't given it to us. And so we're playing hardball. We want these integrity provisions, but if you give them to us, we'll give you a 5-year extension. And that was, and frankly, given all the history, the IIUSA and a lot of groups, most regional centers were like, okay, let's give it to them. Not because we don't need, you know, new visas and all that, but the understanding was we want this, and then we're more than happy to talk about your new, you know, the visa backlog and creating new visas. And I think people were saying, okay, we got to give this a shot. And I think IIUSA was all in. And some people said, why squander this leverage? If we've got these integrity provisions, and again, nobody's against integrity provisions, nobody, you know, and we're thrilled. But let's use that as a way to get not just integrity, but the word was maybe we can get the backlog addressed in the same legislation. And that sounds real reasonable. But what was really the big issue, and I think it's still an issue, is, you know, some people in New York, and this is a powerful area, because Senator Schumer is, you know, majority leader, even when he was minority leader, Nadler is head of judiciary. So this is a really, there's a lot of power here. And the concern was what people really wanted to do was not just get the backlog addressed with this, as leverage to get with integrity. They wanted to sneak in a new definition of TEA so the New York marketplace could again be competitive, because I don't care what happens, if it's a difference between 900,000 and $1.8 million, nobody's spending $1.8 million, and the developers in New York understand that. And so they're like, this program's not working for us now anyway. So we could use TEA. And I think, but everybody knows who's been involved in this, that Senator Grassley and Leahy are not backing off on TEA. It took too long to get there. The regs have passed. And I think, but backlog, the one area I think there is some
unanimity, would you
yes,
say? Unanimity.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And so I think if people, everybody, the program's not working. So people in New York they're saying it's not working. So what are you going to do? You're going to pass integrity. You're not solving the problem. It's still not going to work, because now you still have this backlog, which is really the reason the program's not working. And so you're squat. Why are you doing it? You're not going to get it. This isn't going to happen, and people are going to put.
It is such a tough nut, is it not? I mean, it's just like a layer upon layer upon, and these positions are not crazy.
No, they're not crazy.
They're not off the wall here.
No,
so, well, what about the position? And I think this is the position that's in favor of Grassley Leahy S 831. The position that, okay, totally, we need visa reform, we need visa capacity. I mean, come on, we're only 7.1%, 7% of 140,000. That's not a lot. No. And we're doing a lot of good in this economy, and especially now we can use a boost. So definite unanimity there. What about the argument? Okay, so we need 5-year reauthorization. We need that predictability.
Exactly.
And everybody wants, we all are on board with reasonable integrity. So why not get this done? Let's check those big boxes off. And then on that, we'll build the other things that we need to rebuild this program. What about that?
And I think there's a lot of people who feel like it's time for that, largely because, Senator Grassley has been asking for this for many, many years and not getting it. The other side of the coin is people are saying, hey, if you give them that and they get integrity and they get the 5 years, then, they maybe give you lip service about this backlog and getting additional visas, but they're done. I mean, people have got other important things to do. You're not going to get the attention you want. And the program doesn't work, and it won't work because no one's going to, it's the belief as to whether they're really going to address this backlog or it's lip service. And that's and they're saying, we think this is the time to do it. Why shouldn't they do it now? If you really want to address it, and we want to give you integrity, why not address it at the same time? And that's, and you can understand where people are coming from there. But I think people particularly at IIUSC, are firmly believe that they really genuinely believe that this has to be a standalone bill, because there's no way that Senator Grassley and Leahy are going to permit this legislation to pass with any amendments to it. And I think that the feeling is, let's get this done. There's everybody in the industry, including Schumer and including Ladd, everybody's going to want to address the backlog. So we believe it will be addressed. Other people are saying, we're not sure, and we're not going to give them what they've been wanting for the last 5 years until we get our backlog. And they're saying, you know what, we're not playing this time.
Dare I ask?
I mean, that's the conflict. The only thing else in there is it really just backlog for the New York delegation? Because let's say you did get the backlog addressed, you're still at $1.8 million for a lot of these big developers. They're not going to see a lot of projects. So is it really backlog, but we're also going to try to, at the same time, sneak in a new definition of TEA? And the feeling is, if you're really thinking like that, Grassley and Leahy are not going to put up with
Right,
that. They've
that's for
worked
sure.
too long to kind of say, this program is not for billionaire developers and, in big cities. It's let's get this money out into the country and other places. And you can understand that argument, in urban areas. So, all of it depends on what you believe in. And I think this time people are saying, we've tried it the other way. The program's not working. Let's give them the integrity. And yet there's such unanimity in terms of the backlog that even Senator Schumer and Nadler and everybody would fight for that, even if they couldn't get TEA. So that's the conflict that's going on now. And I think it really does come down to that. I don't think anybody, first of all, no one's against EB-5. There's, this is a bipartisan support for this bill. This bill would but if you need 100% of the Senate and you need Senator Schumer, guess what? He has a constituency that he needs to answer to, and he he's been able to deliver in the past, and I think these developers right now are look, if we need TEA if we can, if not, we don't want to see the program die, but we got nothing to lose by shooting for it. So I think that's really the reality of what's going on from my perspective.
So what do we do? What are we to do now? Okay, so all right. We all agree on the elements of the ideal. We want long-term, heck, we want permanent reauthorization.
Right.
And we want a bigger program. We need more visa capacity in this job creating program.
Right.
I'll agree on that. So how do we get there from here? And if we can't get there from here by June 30th,
right,
where can we go? I mean, what should be the step that we take next?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have all the answers, but I think it's hard to get, it's going to be interesting to see what happens by June 30th. I mean, I think that is really, because look at all the stuff going on in Congress right now. They've got their plate filled. This is now this is a standalone bill. There's a lot of focus on it. But, the idea that this is going to get a lot of attention, given all the major legislation and all the things going on, it's just not, it's not going to happen. So, and this isn't even going to be looked at by most people until the middle of June. And then they're not going to understand, this conflict is going to come up, and, integrity plus backlog, or just, and, there's a good chance they're going to just kick it down the road again. IIUSA believes that Grassley and Leahy have made June 30th a deadline because they don't want to make it easy to kick it down the road again, as if it was on the omnibus or the mandatory spending bills. So, that's the irony. So it's a communication issue. The best thing would be, obviously, if Grassley was real and Leahy really were like, okay, we're going to, Schumer's, we want to deal with backlog a little. Help us with backlog. We want to give you integrity. You've told everybody you're open to it. We're not changing TEA. We're not doing anything you don't like. But backlog, you're not against either. If you ask, and again, this is just my opinion. If you ask a lot of people, they'll say, no, and I haven't talked to Grassley or Leahy's view, but people who have said they're not, forget it. They want a standalone. They're not interested in talking. To me, it's not unreasonable that there could be a compromise. But think about it. They have to devote time to this. Senator Schumer they're busy. They got really important things. They have an infrastructure bill. They have they've got a lot of important things to do. EB-5 is not at the top of their agenda right now, particularly when it's not even, it's not raising a tremendous amount of money. But to me, I would love to see that kind of a compromise. I think we have to raise those issues and make sure, I'd like to see we have to be clear in New York that TEA is not going to happen. I mean, and I think if people in New York understand that has no chance, then I don't think anybody would be against an integrity bill. with backlog or an integrity bill without backlog. But
I think there's a way to bring New York back too. This
yeah,
is
go ahead,
outside the
Carol.
scope of, well, it's
You know as much as I do. Go ahead.
it's just, these are just ideas. I think that there are ways, and I don't want to necessarily go into them, but I think there are ways to bring New York and the tawnier parts of our country back into the program in a robust way. And it's good. We want that. I mean, that's,
Right.
we want variety, we want diversity of programs, and that only makes EB-5 stronger and more attractive.
Right.
So my last question. You've been doing this for a very long time. Dare I say you are the Mac Daddy of EB-5. You heard it here first.
That's
So what would make you jump out of bed and just be super excited to do more EB-5? What would it?
I will tell you, if you address this backlog, you would see this industry pop. And I'm telling you, it's those two things. I'm not worried about the TEA, and I'm not worried about the amount. I do believe, and I think there's a really good shot. You got Mayorkas, he was head of USCIS. He liked EB-5. He had issues, that he had dealt with, but for the most part, he believed in it. Biden's administration, they like EB-5. They're not against EB-5. Nobody's against this. And I do think to make it effective, I think two things. One, immediately they don't start adjudicating these cases in a timely manner. You've already decided you're going to pick the countries without the backlogs. There's no excuse for making them wait years to get adjudicated. And then, and I don't know if that was just a Trump administration dictator, but I think Biden's not into that. He's obviously, and Mayorkas wouldn't be into that. And the second thing would be, if you address this backlog, you'll see billions and billions of dollars come into this country for job creating businesses at a time when, guess what? We need it. You're not going to rely on stimulus for all the building up and things that, New York really was hurting after this thing. They could use some help now. And this kind of, and everybody knows, if you can create this thing at no expense to taxpayers, why not? And here's the final thing, and I think this is really, these are really impressive people. You go out and meet these people, I am blown away. It's not their investment that, that's going to, they'll create jobs, but what they do when they get here is I love talking to these people, and they're doing so many things. They're hungry. They have contacts around the world. It's such a gift to the US that these people want to come here. And, you don't want to get in the way of that. You should facilitate that, because it's not it's not just their money, when for these investments. It's what they're going to create. They're entrepreneurial. They're going to create tons and tons of new jobs and new industries. And why would you want these people going anywhere else? It is in the long-term best interest of this country to get these people, because they will do nothing but add to your economy and jobs. And, you want to have refugees and other categories, but don't exclude these people. This is top notch, and it's a gift to the United States, and they shouldn't walk away from it.
That is the note that we are going to end our panel on, and open the floor to some questions. What do you think? Are you game? Let's do it. Okay, so folks, feel free to pop your questions in the Q&A. Okay, so these are some technical questions, and there are a lot of these, right? People want to know what is going to happen on June 30th to my case. This question is, if EB-5 Regional Center Program is not reauthorized by June 30th, where would that leave the investors in the queue with approved 526s?
You know what, and we have to put this in perspective.
Yeah.
There is no interest in Congress to screw the people who are in the queue. They are, no matter what happens June 3rd, I really do believe that there's no way. It may take a month or two, but everybody in the queue is going to get through. Even in the past, I think when there was the program terminate, for a month or whatever, people were saying even everybody who actually submitted an application was going to get adjudicated. I have zero. I mean, I really, you always have 1%, but I'm telling you, no one wants. Everybody's for the program, and the last thing people want to do is it goes to the integrity of the country. People are not going to screw the people who are in the queue. I don't even believe they're people who've submitted applications. I think they're eventually going to, they'll get through, even if the program, for whatever reason, terminates, because and people have indicated that they're going to find a way to make sure that people that this thing is wound down in an orderly manner. So I think it is important, but I also I really am confident, given the support for this program. People aren't arguing about how the merits. They're arguing about whether there should be a TEA or not, and they're playing, they're all playing poker with it. But no one is in the business of hurting these people. Now, technically, can someone say, wait a minute, the program ends. There's no EB-5 program. Therefore, there's no vehicle for issuing visas at the I-526 or the I-829. Of course, you can say that, but that, there's a practical element to this. And every time there's been a conflict with EB-5 and, delays or it was going to terminate, all the language around it was, okay, we are, we're going to prevent it from happening, but even if it does, we are going to wind this thing down in a very orderly manner. And everybody's going to be down in Washington, make sure that happens. And I don't think there's going to be any pushback against that if in fact it happens. So for those people, I think it is important for those people in the queue who are scared to death. Is there a possibility? Yeah. Is it? Think about it even from the integrity of the U.S. That's an international story. You can't trust the U.S. They encourage you to do this. You make the investment. You do everything you want. You're ready to uproot your family. Oh, sorry, we decided to screw you. That's not going to sell, and there's no upside to the country. And this is a Biden administration. Senator Schumer's you have too much support. Even at Grassley and Lake, nobody wants to hurt these people. And I do think it'll be wound down in a very orderly manner under worst case scenarios.
Yeah. So I think I don't have too much more to add to that. I think termination is what one should worry about. And so the question should be, is that likely? And I think the answer is very, very, very unlikely. I do have an article on my website about sunset effects from prior precedent, and I just posted the link to that in the chat box.
Right.
What will happen?
This is my opinion.
But it's your opinion, Tom.
Yeah, no.
That's why it matters. All right. So what will happen with CanAm investors processes either waiting for 526 or 829 or after June 30th? Well, it's not just CanAm, it's, everybody who in the regional center program is going to be in the exact same boat.
And we're going to go nuts. I mean, CanAm is going to be living in Washington until this gets resolved. So, this is a big deal. I just believe there's we will be at the forefront of all this, as will everybody else. But there's going to be a lot of activity, and I do think it'll get resolved. I mean, I really believe that. So I know people are going to worry, and it's easy for me to say, but I really do think that there's no way we're going to get screwed.
Yep. Well, everyone is going to be taking out our best offensive tools and to fight this if that should happen. So. Right. We're all going to do that, all of us. What are the protections for people with existing 526? Yeah, again, it's the same. Do check out the article. If your case is pending, I assume that's what you mean, and the program is not renewed, there is no authority on this. There's no law, there's no regulation that tells USCIS what it has to do, which is why USCIS has in the past made these ad hoc announcements about what it would do. And essentially they boil down to, we're going to hold them. We're going to hold them in abeyance until the program gets reauthorized, because there's the expectation that it will be reauthorized. But until then, it's pencils down. That's the essence. Okay. I have to leave this meeting. Yes, we are recording, and it will be made available to folks who registered, and eventually on YouTube and on my website. Hello, I am an investor in, okay, I know this isn't a general question. The question is about, you know, if under the doomsday scenario, if the program is terminated, let's say I accept the proposition that my investment, my immigration can't go forward. What about my investment? As a general, yeah.
Yeah, your investment is, you're not getting your investment is going to stay where it is until, until it's supposed to mature. There's no kind of, well, I'm not getting my immigration, so there's really no vehicle for getting back your money legally, because that was a risk factor in I'm sure most of these offerings. But once you make your investment, you can't just unwind all these deals. And so you hopefully you're in a good deal, and when it does unwind, you get paid back your principal. But to get it back early because of anything that happens in immigration, I don't think that's that's not going to happen.
Right. I mean, that's an at-risk legal issue, is you can have the right to demand your capital back. But this is also why, first of all, this is a point of advocacy with USCIS as well. When they change things, it's like, no, we can't go back and unwind these deals. And that's kind of part of the program. And it's also why, if the doomsday scenario happens, everybody, and that includes investors, will be living in DC, COVID or no COVID.
Right.
And fighting this issue. All right. If the EB-5 program doesn't get reauthorized on June 30, is it likely to be included in the September bill? And will the 485 process be smooth after that? Well, I think there's a couple of questions in there. It's about, I guess one aspect of it is that if there's a clean extension short term, would it go to September 30th? I think that's speculation at this moment. What the post June 30 outcome generally, and if there is any kind of reauthorization, whether it's a 5-year under the Grassley-Leahy or shorter term, and what does the shorter term look like? How short is it? How long is it? Is it substantively any different? Those are all questions. This is why we're gathered today, and we're kind of constantly talking about it. We don't know. At least I don't. Tom?
I don't know, but my gut, even we were on the phone with Schumer's. I mean, people don't even take the questions. Of course it's going to be reauthorized. Probably the same. Probably the way it is now. We're going to just kick the can down the road, which is what it's been happening for the last, let's face it, 29 years or 30 years. So everybody feels, but what you're afraid of is this miscommunication where somebody says, I've warned you, I've warned you, I've warned you. But I think I think we'll be okay. I really do. But I can't guarantee.
Yeah, right. Yep. And it's certainly nothing that we take for granted either.
Right.
My 485, lots of questions about 485s. Absolutely. Lots of questions about 485s and lots of questions about consular processed cases and delays over there. So the question is, what happens to my pending 485? It's the same question as what happens to my pending 526. And it is, USCIS has to make a pronouncement about it, since there's no authority. And it's very likely that the service will hold those cases in abeyance, meaning pencils down. They won't work those cases until there's reauthorization. I do think that's what we'll expect on the 45s. 45s are in the jurisdiction of USCIS. Consular processing cases are in the jurisdiction of the State Department. And they are working with another layer of complications aside from the reauthorization and lapse, which is all of the protocols that the State Department and consulates have to abide by with COVID. And so all of you who are consular processing your cases and all of us know that the consulates have been largely closed and largely close to EB-5 in the last year. So part of that is, when are the consulates going to come back to normal operations? And it's been up and down, right? You know, there was diplomacy strong some point in the summer of last year, and we thought they were gearing to open their doors back up again. And then there were some spikes worldwide, and then the doors shut again. So it is a very, very fluid situation. I think that there is an issue with respect to EB-5 cases being shut out of IB processing at these consulates. And that is an issue, I think, and it's the subject of some litigation, including on my part. So, and I think that I personally don't take it for granted that that these cases can be won. I mean, you always have, the government is always going to argue, is going to have the argument, we've got a worldwide pandemic, right, and you must defer to how the agency is going to behave to protect staff and just to be safe and prudent. That's a big argument. It is very, very compelling. So I think to overcome that very, very compelling counter argument, the plaintiff's arguments have to be very strong. And I think that it's also very fact dependent. So I think that, in short, litigation, I think that might be a path forward for some cases. I do not believe that it's a blanket solution for all. Okay, on consular processing. We've got some questions coming up in the chats. Oh, quite a few. And yeah, I am just going to take these on. Lots of questions about your pending cases. Totally understandable. There's a question in here about TEA. We're talking about TEAs, targeted employment areas. It is it's an acronym for a designation. It's a geographic designation that allows projects that are in TEAs to qualify for the lower investment threshold. We've always had two investment thresholds. We've had the basic, which was 1 million, and now it's 1.8. And then we have the TEA threshold for investment projects that are located in TEAs at half that amount, at a lower amount. It was 500,000 and now it's 900,000. Okay, right. We did not receive a link to your article. I will make sure you have it somehow. I'm gonna go back to our Q&As. All right, Tom, do you have any questions? Or we have 1 minute left. Close out the house. Give us some parting thoughts.
I think this, first of all, thank you for having me. I think, look, the EB-5 program, if it really does create jobs at no expense to taxpayers. It's got bipartisan support. It's not a question of do we want it. It's a question of, some fine tuning. This program is going to be around. I mean, I think it's going to be slow this year, probably maybe even next year. But this program is going to be around. And I think, you always hear the bad news about it. There's a lot of great stories about how this program has really, really played some important economic. Even the example we gave about the convention center that wouldn't have happened but for EB-5. You don't hear those stories, because like safe landings don't make news. Everybody wants the tragedy, but this is a great program, and most, virtually the vast majority are doing it right. That's why we don't mind integrity. And I think it's got a good future. And I think this is a bump. It could be a little bumpy for a little while, but this is going to come. I really believe it's going to come out on the right side. And I think I understand the worry. I would be worried, but you know, I do think that you know these issues will be resolved in a way that gives people a lot of comfort.
I do too, Tom. It's just too good for there not to be a good
Right.
result to this.
Right.
Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
Fun.
I will see you soon. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. And this was a real special event for us today, having Tom. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.